The irony wasn't lost on me as I signed the commitment papers at Willowbrook Psychiatric Facility. My mother, Margaret Lawson, was being led away in soft restraints, her voice echoing through the sterile corridors as she screamed that her own daughter was betraying her. The security guards exchanged glances. They'd seen this before. Family members making the hardest decision of their lives. What they didn't know was that I'd spent 3 months orchestrating this moment with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a spider. "Please, Becca," she cried, twisting against the restraints. "You know I'm not sick. Tell them. Tell them what you've done." I met her eyes through the reinforced glass window of the intake room. For just a moment, I saw the woman who had raised me, who had sung me lullabies when thunderstorms kept me awake, who had worked double shifts to pay for my psychology degree. Then I remembered David's face when he handed me back the engagement ring, and that fleeting sympathy crystallized into something much colder. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said to the intake coordinator, my voice professionally steady. "She's been having episodes like this for weeks now. The delusions, the paranoia. She really believes I'm conspiring against her." Before we go any further, welcome back to Revenge Stories with Kyle. And if this is your first time watching any of our videos, we encourage you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it motivates us to continue creating even more powerful stories for you. So stick with us to the very end. And if this story moves you, drop your comments and share with a friend. Now, let's dive back in. My name is Rebecca Lawson, though everyone calls me Becca. I'm 29 years old, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in family therapy here in Portland, Oregon. I've always believed that understanding human behavior was my superpower. The ability to see patterns, to recognize manipulation tactics, to untangle the complex web of family dynamics that shape us all. What I never expected was that my greatest case study would be my own life, and my most dangerous patient would be the woman who gave birth to me. Growing up, it was just Mom and me against the world. Dad died in a construction accident when I was 8, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt and a grief-stricken widow with no college education and a daughter to raise. Margaret Lawson was only 31 then, beautiful in that effortless way some women possess, with auburn hair that caught light like copper wire and green eyes that could shift from warm to calculating in the space of a heartbeat. She sacrificed everything for me, or so I thought. Worked nights at the hospital as a cleaning lady while I slept. Took online courses during my school hours to get a real estate license. I was 18 years old when I realized I could defer my college acceptance to help her through her depression. 22 when I decided to put my master's degree on hold so she could afford to start her own real estate practice. By the time I finally finished my doctorate at 27, Margaret Realty was thriving, and my mother was Portland's third highest earning agent in the luxury market. "We're a team, baby girl," she used to say, stroking my hair as we planned my future from her kitchen table. "It's always been you and me. We don't need anyone else." I should have paid attention to that last part. 3 years ago, I met David Chen at a continuing education conference on trauma-informed therapy. He was there representing the architectural firm designing a new treatment center, and I was presenting on family systems theory. David was brilliant, Stanford-educated, successful at 32, with kind eyes and a laugh that made me feel lighter than I had in years. More importantly, he saw me as Becca the woman, not Becca the daughter, or Becca the caretaker, or Becca the therapist, just me. When I brought him home the first time, Mom was charm incarnate. She cooked her famous pot roast, asked thoughtful questions about his work, and regaled him with carefully curated stories from my childhood, the ones that made me sound precocious and accomplished, rather than the ones that might suggest I'd been parentified from age 8 onward. By the end of the evening, David was smitten with both of us. "Your mom is incredible," he said as we sat on my porch swing later that night. "You can see where you get your strength. I leaned into his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with Mom's lavender garden. She's been my whole world for so long. I'm glad you like her. Like her? I think I'm a little intimidated by her, he laughed. She's going to be a tough act to follow as the most important woman in your life. If only I'd known then that she had no intention of stepping aside. Our relationship progressed naturally. Dinners, weekend trips, long conversations about everything and nothing. David was everything I hadn't dared to hope for. Emotionally available, intellectually stimulating, genuinely interested in building a life together. When he proposed 18 months later on the Oregon coast with Mom's blessing and her grandmother's ring, I thought I'd finally found my happy ending. The ring was a brilliant cut solitaire that caught the sunset like trapped fire. She insisted I ask her permission first, David said, sliding it onto my finger as waves crashed behind us. "And what are you getting?" I asked, tears blurring my vision. The most complicated, compassionate, beautiful woman I've ever met. And apparently the most protective mother-in-law in the Northwest. We laughed then, giddy with possibility. 6 months to plan the perfect wedding, a honeymoon in Italy, kids within the next 2 years. We'd have to move quickly because of my endometriosis, but David was ready. He wanted the whole picture. Marriage, family, growing old together, on a porch swing just like this one. Mom threw herself into wedding planning with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd waited 29 years to plan her only daughter's perfect day. She researched venues, negotiated with caterers, and somehow convinced the most exclusive florist in Portland to give us their September availability. She and David developed an easy rapport, bonding over their shared love of old movies and their mutual determination to spoil me. "I've never seen you this happy, sweetheart," she said one evening as we addressed invitations at her dining room table. "David's perfect for you. He sees how special you are." I looked up from the cream-colored envelopes, studying her face in the lamplight. "Are you okay with this? Really? I know it's been just us for so long." "Oh, honey." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "All I've ever wanted is for you to be loved the way you deserve. If David feels like the center of your universe, then I couldn't be happier." The center of his universe. That phrase should have been a warning sign, but I was too blissfully in love to notice the slight edge in her voice when she said it. The first sign that something was wrong came 4 months before the wedding. I was working late at my practice when David called, sounding confused and slightly hurt. "Hey, did you know your mom was at my office today?" he asked without preamble. I paused in my review of case notes. "What? Why?" "She said she was in the neighborhood and wanted to take me to lunch. We went to that Italian place on Morrison. It was nice, I guess, but kind of weird. She kept asking about my work, my family, my ex-girlfriends, really personal stuff." A cold finger of unease traced down my spine. "What kind of personal stuff? Like whether I had ever been in therapy? Whether I thought you seemed stressed lately? Whether I'd noticed any mood swings or, I don't know, concerning behaviors?" His voice carried a note of bewilderment. "Becca, why would she ask me that?" I forced my voice to remain calm, therapeutic. "I'm sure she's just being protective. Wedding planning stress, you know? We're all a little on edge." "Maybe," he said, but he didn't sound convinced. "She also asked if I was sure I was ready for marriage. Said something about how your grandmother had some mental health issues, and sometimes these things skip generations." The case file slipped from my hands, scattering pages across my desk. "She said what?" "Hey, it's okay," David said quickly. "I told her that even if you did have anxiety or depression or whatever, it wouldn't change how I feel about you." "But Becca, your grandmother didn't have mental health issues, did she?" I thought she died of a heart attack when you were in college." "She did." My voice came out as a whisper. "Grandma Ruth was sharp as a tack until the day she died. I don't know why Mom would say that." But even as I spoke, a terrible understanding was beginning to dawn. I thought of all the times Mom had made subtle comments about my stress levels, my emotional responses, my need for routine and control. Comments that had seemed caring at the time, but now took on a more sinister cast. "David, has she talked to you about me before? About my mental state?" There was a long pause. "Once or twice, nothing major. She just seems worried about you, that's all. Says you've been having trouble sleeping, getting overwhelmed easily. She's probably just being a concerned mom." After we hung up, I sat in my darkened office for nearly an hour, mind racing. As a therapist, I knew the signs of emotional manipulation, the subtle undermining, the false concern, the careful planting of doubts. I also knew that the most effective manipulators were often the ones closest to their victims, the ones who understood their psychology intimately. But this was my mother, the woman who had sacrificed her youth for my future. Surely I was overthinking things, seeing pathology where there was only maternal protectiveness. The second incident happened 2 weeks later. I came home early from work with a migraine to find Mom in my kitchen, standing over my open purse with my birth control compact in her hand. "Mom, what are you doing?" She startled, dropping the compact back into my purse. "Oh, honey, you scared me. I was just looking for a pen to leave you a note. I brought by those fabric samples for the reception linens." I studied her face, looking for the tells I'd learned to recognize in my practice, the micro-expressions that betrayed deception. Her smile was bright, but it didn't reach her eyes, and there was a slight flush high on her cheekbones. "You were going through my purse?" "Of course not, sweetheart. It was sitting open on the counter and I saw your birth control sitting right there. I was just worried. You know how forgetful you get when you're stressed. Have you been taking them regularly?" The concern in her voice was perfectly pitched, but something about it felt performative. "Yes, Mom, I take them every day at the same time. Why?" "No reason, honey. It's just that David mentioned you've seemed a little emotional lately, and I know hormone fluctuations can affect your mood. Maybe you should talk to Dr. Peterson about switching to a different brand." I felt that same cold unease from David's phone call. "David said I've seemed emotional?" "Just moody, sweetheart. Nothing serious. We all get that way sometimes." She moved to the stove and began stirring a pot of soup I hadn't noticed before. "You know, your father used to say I got a little unpredictable around my cycle. It's perfectly normal." The casual mention of my father, dead for 21 years and hardly a reliable source on women's health, felt deliberate, as did the implication that my emotional responses were somehow abnormal or concerning enough for my fiancé to discuss with my mother. That night I lay in bed next to David, studying his profile in the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window. "David, have I seemed different to you lately?" "Different how?" "Moody, emotional, unpredictable." "Becca, you're getting married in 4 months. Every bride gets a little stressed out. Why are you asking?" "Mom said you'd mentioned I seemed emotional lately." David was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen back asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "I might have said something about wedding stress. But Becca, has your mom always been so involved in our relationship?" "What do you mean?" "She texts me a lot. Pictures of flowers, questions about my preferences for the reception, stuff like that. But also other things, personal things." My heart began to pound. "Like what?" "Like asking if I'd noticed you forgetting things more often, or if you'd seemed anxious about the future.
She's always framing it as concern, but I don't know. Sometimes it feels like she's looking for problems that aren't there. I wanted to feel relieved that David was seeing it too, but instead I felt sick. Because if Mom was trying to plant seeds of doubt about my mental stability, the question was why? And the only answer I could think of was too terrible to consider. "David, do you think I'm unstable?" He sat up in bed, fully awake now. "What? No! God, no! Becca, you're one of the most emotionally intelligent, grounded people I know. That's what I fell in love with. Your ability to see through people's bullshit and still believe in their capacity for growth." He cupped my face in his hands. "Where is this coming from?" I leaned into his touch, wanting desperately to believe him. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind, like there are conversations happening around me that I'm not part of, like people are worried about me and I don't know why. "Hey," his voice was fierce with protectiveness. "Look at me. You are not losing your mind. You're a successful therapist with a doctorate in psychology. You help people for a living. If you were having mental health issues, you'd be the first to recognize the signs and get help, right?" I nodded, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. "Right. Besides," he said, lying back down and pulling me against his chest, "even if you did have anxiety or depression or whatever, it wouldn't change how I feel about you. That's what marriage means, in sickness and health, remember?" As I drifted off to sleep in his arms, I tried to push away the growing certainty that my mother was systematically trying to undermine my relationship. Because if that was true, I had to ask myself what she hoped to gain from its destruction. And I was afraid I already knew the answer. Have you ever felt trapped by someone's sacrifices for you? When does genuine care cross the line into emotional manipulation? Drop your thoughts in the comments and do not forget to hit that subscribe button.
The breaking point came 6 weeks before the wedding, on a Tuesday evening that started like any other. I'd spent the day in sessions with clients, helping them navigate their own family dysfunction, and was looking forward to a quiet dinner with David and final dress fittings with Mom. I arrived at David's apartment to find him pacing the living room, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. The engagement ring, my engagement ring, sat on the coffee table like an accusation. "We need to talk," he said without looking at me. My legs went weak. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Your mother called me at work today. God, Becca, she was crying, really upset." He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. Doubt, fear, the beginning of the end. "She said she's been worried about you for months, that you've been having episodes." Episodes, the word came out as a croak. "Paranoid thoughts? Mood swings?" She said you've been accusing her of trying to sabotage our relationship, that you've been checking and rechecking your birth control like you think someone's tampering with it. She said, she swallowed hard. "She said your grandmother was institutionalized for paranoid delusions when you were a baby, and that these things can be hereditary." The world tilted sideways. "That's not true. None of that is true." "She had documentation, Becca, medical records. She showed me your grandmother's commitment papers from 1978. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Grandma Ruth had never been institutionalized. She lived independently until her heart attack at 73, sharp and funny and completely sane. But if Mom had medical records... "David, those records are fake. I don't know how she got them or made them, but my grandmother was never mentally ill." The look on his face, pity mixed with fear, told me everything I needed to know. "Becca, this is exactly what your mom said you'd say, that you'd become convinced everyone was lying to you, making things up. Because everyone is lying to you." I could hear my voice rising, becoming shrill, and I forced myself to take a breath. "David, I'm a psychologist. I know what mental illness looks like, and I know what manipulation looks like too. My mother is systematically trying to destroy our relationship, and I can't figure out why." He sat down heavily on the couch, suddenly looking older than his 32 years. "She also said you've been having trouble at work, that your supervisor called her because they were concerned about your behavior with clients." My blood went cold. "My supervisor never called her. That's completely unethical and—" I stopped, realizing how defensive I sounded. "David, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. Really listen." I sat beside him, careful not to touch him, and tried to organize my thoughts like I would with a client in crisis. "Has my mother ever tried to undermine any of your relationships before? With friends, family members, previous girlfriends? What does that have to— Just answer the question." He was quiet for a moment. When I mentioned my ex-fiancée once, she made some comments about how I was too good for someone who would hurt me like that. But that's normal, right? She's protective of you, so she's protective of me too. What about my friends? Have you noticed that I don't really have close female friends anymore? You're busy with work. David, I used to have friends, lots of them, but over the years they've all drifted away, usually after spending time with my mom. I could see him starting to really listen, and I pressed on. "Remember Sarah from graduate school? She was my maid of honor until last month. She said she couldn't make it to the wedding. She said she couldn't be part of a wedding where the bride was clearly having a breakdown and no one was getting her help. Those were her exact words, David. And the only person she'd talked to about my mental state was my mother." Understanding began to dawn in his eyes, followed immediately by doubt. "But why would your mom want to sabotage your relationships?" I took his hands in mine, willing him to see the truth. "I think she's in love with you." The words hung in the air between us like a smoking gun. David's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and finally reluctant recognition. "That's impossible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it? Think about all those lunches, all those texts, all those conversations about our relationship. Think about how she touches you when she talks to you, how she lights up when you walk into a room. Think about how she's always finding reasons to be alone with you." I watched the memories play across his face, seeing them recontextualized in this new light. The too long hugs, the way she dressed when she knew he'd be around, the intimate tone of voice she used when discussing concerns about me. "But even if that's true," he said slowly, "it doesn't mean you're not having some kind of breakdown. The timing could be coincidental." I felt something crack inside my chest. "You really believe I'm losing my mind?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." His voice was barely a whisper. "Your mom showed me text messages you supposedly sent her, talking about government conspiracies and people watching you. She had photos of notebooks you'd filled with paranoid ramblings. She had a recording of you having what sounded like a post-psychotic episode on the phone." The room spun around me. "I never sent those texts. I never filled those notebooks. And I sure as hell never had a post-psychotic episode." "Then where did they come from?" I stared at him, realizing the true scope of what my mother had done. This wasn't just manipulation. It was psychological warfare. She'd constructed an entire false narrative of my mental decline, complete with fabricated evidence, and she'd done it with the precision of someone who understood exactly how to make her lies believable. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. "Becca, please, just go. I need to think." After he left, taking the ring with him, I sat in his empty apartment and tried to process what had just happened. My mother, the woman who had raised me, sacrificed for me, claimed to love me more than life itself, had systematically destroyed the most important relationship of my life,
and she'd done it by convincing everyone I was insane. The cruelest part was that she was right about one thing. I was starting to feel crazy. When everyone around you believes you're delusional, when the evidence of your own eyes and memory is contradicted by official documents and recorded conversations, when your own mother is willing to betray you this completely, how do you trust your own mind? But then my training kicked in. I was a therapist. I understood gaslighting, manipulation, psychological abuse. I knew how predators operated, how they isolated their victims and made them question reality. The fact that I could recognize these tactics, could analyze them clinically, was proof that my mind was intact. My mother had made one crucial mistake. She taught me too well how to understand human behavior. And now I was going to use everything she taught me to destroy her just as completely as she had tried to destroy me. It was time to fight back.
I started with the medical records. If Mom had somehow fabricated documentation of my grandmother's institutionalization, there would be traces, digital footprints, inconsistencies in the paperwork, something that would expose the lie. It took me 3 days of phone calls to various hospitals and state facilities, but I finally reached a records clerk at Oregon State Hospital who was willing to help. Ruth Margaret Lawson had never been a patient there. In fact, there was no record of her ever receiving inpatient psychiatric treatment anywhere in the state. "Are you sure?" I asked. "The records I've seen show she was committed in 1978. "Ma'am, I've been working here for 32 years. I've seen every fake document families have tried to pass off as authentic, and let me tell you, they're getting more sophisticated. But our actual records from 1978 are very specific. No Ruth Lawson, no Ruth anything with those dates of birth and social security numbers." I felt the first flutter of vindication. What would someone need to create convincing fake medical records? Access to official letterhead, knowledge of the terminology and procedures from that era, and honestly, time and patience. The kind of thing someone might do if they really needed to prove a point. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the photocopies Mom had shown David. They looked authentic, official letterhead, proper formatting, even aging that suggested decades-old paperwork. But now I could see the subtle inconsistencies. Medical terms that hadn't been in use in 1978, diagnostic codes from a later version of the DSM, signatures that didn't quite match the writing style of the era. My mother was many things, but she wasn't a forger, which meant she'd had help. I spent the next week playing detective, tracing the origins of the fake documents. It led me to a private investigator named Marcus Webb, who specialized in background research for divorce attorneys. When I met with him, posing as someone who needed to verify family medical history for insurance purposes, he was surprisingly forthcoming. "Yeah, I remember that job. Nice lady, said she needed to prove mental illness in her family line for some kind of legal proceeding. Paid cash, wanted it to look authentic, but not stand up to serious scrutiny. I told her it was borderline illegal, but she said it was just to convince someone of something temporarily." To convince someone of what? She didn't say exactly, but I got the impression it was family drama. Maybe trying to prove someone was unfit for custody or inheritance. He shrugged. "Look, I make fake documents for lawyers all the time. As long as they're not used to commit actual fraud, it's just creative research." I left his office with copies of his records and a sick understanding of how long my mother had been planning this. The documents were dated 3 months ago, right around the time I'd first noticed the strange questions and comments about my mental state. Next, I focused on the text messages and recordings. As a therapist, I understood technology well enough to know that both could be faked with the right software and a little creativity. But I also knew that most people, including my mother, weren't sophisticated enough to do it without leaving digital fingerprints. I hired a cybersecurity expert through my practice, claiming I needed help with a client who was being cyberstalked. Within 2 days, she had traced the fake text messages to a burner phone registered to a Margaret L. Lawson, and the audio recordings to a voice manipulation app that had been downloaded to my mother's iPad. Whoever did this wasn't trying to fool the FBI, she explained, showing me the digital trail. This is amateur hour, the kind of thing someone might do to convince family members or friends, but it wouldn't hold up to any serious investigation. What about the notebooks, the ones with the paranoid writings? Harder to trace, but if you can get me samples of your handwriting, I can tell you if it matches your normal writing patterns. My guess is someone tried to mimic your handwriting, but didn't have enough practice to make it completely convincing. That evening, I broke into my mother's house. I still had a key from the years when I'd helped take care of her, and I knew she'd be at her weekly book club until at least 10 p.m. I found the notebooks in her bedroom closet, along with samples of my handwriting going back to childhood, birthday cards, school papers, anything she'd saved over the years. Seeing my own handwriting laid out like a roadmap for forgery made me physically ill. This wasn't the impulsive act of a woman in love. This was calculated, methodical, psychological warfare. She'd been studying me, planning my destruction for months. But she'd also left evidence of her obsession with David. His business cards tucked into her jewelry box, printouts of his social media profiles, a notebook filled with details about his schedule, his preferences, his past relationships, information that went far beyond what any normal future mother-in-law would need to know. Most disturbing of all, I found drafts of a letter she'd apparently planned to send him after successfully breaking us up. David, I know this is a difficult time for you, but I want you to know that I'm here if you need someone to talk to. Becca's illness isn't her fault, but that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your happiness. You deserve someone who can give you the stable, loving relationship you've always wanted, someone who understands what you need and isn't afraid to fight for it. I photographed everything, my hands shaking with rage and disgust. My own mother had been planning to swoop in and comfort my devastated fiancé after destroying my life. She'd been positioning herself as the understanding older woman who could offer him the stability his mentally ill fiancé couldn't provide. The final piece of evidence was the most damning. Buried in her laptop's browser history, I found searches for how to get someone committed involuntarily and signs of mental breakdown in young women. She'd been researching how to have me institutionalized. As I drove home that night, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. I was no longer the devastated daughter trying to understand her mother's betrayal. I was a predator who had identified her prey and was preparing to streak. My mother thought she understood psychology, but she was about to learn the difference between manipulation and genuine expertise. She taught me to be strong, to be smart, to be ruthless when necessary. Now I was going to show her exactly how good a student I had been.
The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I wasn't going to fight Mom's narrative. I was going to lean into it so hard that it would collapse under its own weight. She wanted everyone to believe I was having a mental breakdown. Fine. I'd give her a breakdown so convincing that when the truth came out, no one would ever trust her again. I started with David. 3 days after our breakup, I called him, crying. "I think you were right," I sobbed into the phone. "I think something is wrong with me. I've been having these thoughts, these paranoid ideas about Mom trying to hurt me. But that's crazy, right? She loves me." "Becca, slow down. What kind of thoughts?" "I keep thinking she's in love with you. I know how insane that sounds, but I can't shake the feeling. And yesterday, I found myself checking my birth control pills, convinced someone had tampered with them, just like she said I was doing." I let my voice break convincingly. "David, I'm scared. What if I really am losing my mind like Grandma Ruth?" The relief in his voice was audible. "Hey, it's gonna be okay. Recognizing that something might be wrong is the first step, right? That's what you'd tell your clients. Would you come with me to see someone? A psychiatrist? I don't think I can do this alone. Of course, we'll figure this out together. I hung up, feeling sick about the deception, but knowing it was necessary. David needed to see Mom's true nature with his own eyes, and the only way that would happen was if she thought she was winning. Next, I reached out to my former maid of honor, Sarah, with a similar performance. "You were right to be concerned about me," I told her during a carefully orchestrated coffee meeting. "I think I have been having some kind of breakdown. The things I said about Mom trying to sabotage my relationship. God, Sarah, I can't believe I accused her of that. She's been nothing but supportive." Sarah's expression shifted from wariness to sympathy. "Becca, we've all been worried about you. Your mom especially. She's been calling everyone, asking if we'd noticed changes in your behavior." "She has?" I made my voice small, vulnerable. "What kind of changes?" "Just mood swings, paranoid thoughts, isolation. She's been so worried that she's been documenting everything in case you need professional help." I filed that information away with cold satisfaction. Mom was telling everyone about her concerns, building a public record of my supposed mental decline. Perfect. The hardest part was the family performance. I arranged a dinner with Mom, David, and my Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, and the closest thing to an objective family witness I had left. "I owe you an apology," I told Mom over appetizers, my voice shaking with manufactured emotion. "I've been having these awful thoughts about you, these paranoid delusions that you were trying to break up me and David. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know how much you love us both." Mom's eyes lit up with triumph, quickly masked by maternal concern. "Oh, sweetheart, I've been so worried, but this is good. Admitting there's a problem is the first step to getting better. I keep thinking someone's watching me, following me, and I've been obsessing over things that don't matter, like whether my medication has been tampered with. I know it's crazy, but I can't stop the thoughts." David reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "We're going to get you help, okay? Dr. Morrison can see you next week." "Dr. Morrison?" Aunt Linda looked concerned. "Isn't he the psychiatrist who handles commitment cases?" The table went silent. I saw Mom's face flush slightly. She'd probably recommended him specifically because of his willingness to institutionalize patients quickly. I asked Margaret to recommend someone who specializes in situations like this. I let myself look frightened. "Commitment cases? You think I need to be hospitalized?" "Only if it's necessary, honey," Mom said, her voice dripping with false comfort. Aunt Linda was studying Mom with a puzzled expression. "Margaret, don't you think that's a little extreme? Becca seems upset, but she's not dangerous to herself or anyone else." "You don't see her at home, Linda. The paranoid rants, the checking and rechecking locks, the accusations. Just yesterday, she accused me of reading her mail." Mom's performance was flawless. The concerned mother pushed to her breaking point by her daughter's deteriorating mental state. "I did do that," I whispered, letting tears spill down my cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't know why I keep thinking these horrible things about you." That night, after I had excused myself early, claiming exhaustion, I knew Mom would stay behind to talk to David and Aunt Linda. I parked around the corner and waited, then followed Mom when she finally left the restaurant. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove to David's apartment. I watched from across the street as she knocked on his door, watched him let her in, watched the lights stay on in his living room for 2 hours. When she finally emerged, her lipstick was smeared and her hair was muscled, and she stood on his doorstep for a long moment before kissing his cheek and walking to her car. David stood in the doorway watching her go, his expression unreadable in the porch light. I had everything I needed. Dr. Morrison's office was exactly what I had expected. Leather furniture, diplomas on the walls, the faint scent of psychiatric authority. I'd researched him thoroughly, 63 years old school in his approach, with a reputation for quick diagnoses and quicker commitments. Exactly the kind of doctor who would take a colleague's word over a patient's protests.
Mom came with me to the appointment, playing the supportive but exhausted parent to perfection. David met us there, his face grave with concern. "Dr. Morrison, thank you so much for seeing Becca on such short notice. I'm just at my wit's end. The paranoid thoughts, the mood swings. Yesterday, she barricaded herself in her room and wouldn't come out for hours. I'd done no such thing, but I nodded along sadly. I keep thinking people are plotting against me, even Mom, especially Mom." I looked at her with manufactured confusion. "But that's crazy, right? Mom would never hurt me." Dr. Morrison was taking notes, his pen scratching across the legal pad with clinical efficiency. "Tell me about these paranoid thoughts, Becca. What specifically do you believe your mother is doing?"
"I've brought some documentation," Mom said, pulling out a folder. Text messages Becca sent me, examples of her handwriting when she's having episodes, even an audio recording from last week when she called me in the middle of the night ranting about government surveillance. She handed over the fake evidence with the solemnity of a grieving mother, and I had to admire her thoroughness. If I hadn't known better, I would have been convinced by the performance myself. "Dr. Morrison," I said, my voice small and frightened, "do you think I need to be hospitalized? Everyone keeps talking about commitment proceedings, and I'm scared." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he said kindly. "But given the severity of your symptoms and your family history of mental illness, we may need to consider intensive treatment." The appointment lasted another 45 minutes, with Mom and David providing corroborating testimony about my deteriorating condition, while I played the confused, frightened patient to perfection. By the end, Dr. Morrison was clearly convinced that I posed a danger to myself and possibly others. "I'd like to see you again in 3 days," he said as we prepared to leave. "In the meantime, I want you to stay with your mother. I don't think you should be alone right now." Perfect. I was about to get a front row seat to Mom's victory lap. That evening, as I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals and participation trophies, I heard Mom on the phone in the kitchen. "I know it's heartbreaking, but it's for her own good. Dr. Morrison thinks she'll need at least a month of inpatient treatment, maybe longer. Yes, David's taking it hard, but he knows this is the right thing to do. Of course I'll be here for him. Someone needs to help him through this." I crept closer to the kitchen doorway, my phone recording every word. "The wedding is definitely off. I mean, how could it not be? But maybe when she gets better, well, if she gets better. David's young. He has his whole life ahead of him. He shouldn't have to sacrifice his happiness for someone who may never be stable enough for marriage." The next morning, Mom brought me breakfast in bed, a kindness she hadn't shown since I was a child with the flu. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked, sitting on the edge of my bed with false maternal concern. "Confused? Like I'm living in someone else's life. Mom, what happens if Dr. Morrison wants to commit me?" "Oh, honey," she stroked my hair with practiced tenderness. "Let's not think about that right now. Let's just focus on getting you well." "But what about David? What about the wedding?" Her pause was just a fraction too long. "David loves you, but he's also realistic about what he can handle. If you need long-term treatment, he'll have to make some difficult decisions." "You mean he'll leave me?" "I mean he'll do what's best for both of you. And Becca, that might mean letting you go so you can focus on your recovery without the pressure of maintaining a relationship." I stared at her, seeing the calculation behind the compassion. She was already positioning herself as David's support system, the understanding woman who would help him through the difficult decision to abandon his mentally ill fiancé. "Would you take care of him? If I have to go away for treatment, would you make sure he's okay?" The flash of triumph in her eyes lasted only a second, but I caught it. "Of course, sweetheart. David's like family now. I'd never let him go through this alone." That afternoon, while Mom was at work, I made 2 crucial phone calls. The first was to my cybersecurity expert, asking her to trace the IP addresses of all the fake evidence and compile a comprehensive report. The second was to Detective Sarah Chen, no relation to David, at Portland PD, whom I'd met through my work with trauma victims. "I need to report a case of elder abuse and fraud, but the victim is me and the perpetrator is my mother." "That's unusual. Can you come in tomorrow to make a formal statement?" "Actually, I was hoping you could meet me at Willowbrook Psychiatric Facility tomorrow at 2 p.m. I think you'll want to witness this in person." The next day, my second appointment with Dr. Morrison, I arrived with Mom and David as planned, but I also had Detective Chen waiting in the lobby, along with my cybersecurity expert and copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. "Dr. Morrison, I need to tell you something important. I've been lying about my symptoms." Mom went rigid beside me. "Becca, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not having paranoid delusions. I'm saying every suspicion I had about you was correct, and I have proof." I looked directly at Dr. Morrison. "My mother has been systematically trying to have me institutionalized so she can pursue a relationship with my fiancé." "Becca, you're having an episode," Mom said quickly, her voice rising with panic. "Dr. Morrison, this is exactly what I was talking about. The paranoid accusations, the inability to accept reality." Mom forged medical records about my grandmother, created fake text messages and audio recordings, and even broke into my apartment to plant evidence of mental illness. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of her conversation from the night before. "She's been planning this for months." David's face went white as he heard Mom's voice discussing his future without me, positioning herself as his emotional support system. Dr. Morrison looked confused and slightly annoyed. "Ms. Lawson, if this is some kind of—" "It's not a game," I said firmly. "Detective Chen is waiting in your lobby with documented proof of everything I'm saying. Mom hired a private investigator to forge my grandmother's medical records. She used voice manipulation software to create recordings of me having episodes. She's been systematically isolating me from friends and family while positioning herself as the concerned mother dealing with her mentally ill daughter." Mom was on her feet now, her composure cracking. "This is insane! Becca, you're having a complete break from reality." "Am I?" I turned to David. "Yesterday after my appointment, did my mother come to your apartment? Did you two have a long conversation about my future? Did she offer to help you through the difficult decision of leaving me?" David's silence was answer enough. "Dr. Morrison, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I specialize in family systems and psychological manipulation. What my mother has done is called gaslighting, and it's a form of psychological abuse. She's tried to convince everyone I'm mentally ill so she can take my place in my fiancé's life." The door opened and Detective Chen entered with my cybersecurity expert. "Dr. Morrison, I'm Detective Chen, Portland PD. We need to speak with Margaret Lawson about charges of fraud, forgery, and psychological abuse." What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. One by one, the pillars of Mom's deception crumbled. The fake medical records were exposed as forgeries. The text messages were traced to her burner phone. The audio recordings were proven to be digitally manipulated. Her own browser history showed months of research into involuntary commitment procedures. Most damning of all was her notebook filled with details about David's life, information that went far beyond normal maternal concern and crossed into obsessive territory. "Ms. Lawson," Detective Chen said as she prepared to read her mom her rights, "you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and stalking. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Mom looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted hatred. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed, I gave you my whole life, and this is how you repay me?" "No, Mom," I said quietly. "You tried to take my whole life. There's a difference." Dr. Morrison was staring at the evidence spread across his desk with professional fascination and personal horror. "Miss Lawson, I owe you a profound apology. This level of manipulation, it's textbook psychological abuse. If you hadn't had the training to recognize it, I would be in a psychiatric facility right now, and she'd be comforting my ex-fiancé through the tragedy of having to abandon his mentally ill girlfriend." As Detective Chen led Mom away, she turned back one more time. "You'll regret this, Becca. When you're alone and you realize what you've lost, you regret this." "The only thing I regret," I called after her, "is that it took me 29 years to see who you really are."
3 months later, I sat in the visiting room at Willowbrook Psychiatric Facility, watching my mother through the reinforced glass window. She'd been committed for evaluation after her arrest, when her behavior in custody, alternating between violent outbursts and calculated manipulation attempts, convinced the court that she posed a danger to herself and others. The irony was exquisite. She'd spent months trying to have me institutionalized, and now she was the one wearing hospital scrubs and asking for supervised visits with the outside world. The doctors say you've been diagnosed with erotomania and narcissistic personality disorder, I said when the guard brought her to the visiting table. They also think there might be some underlying psychotic features. How does it feel to be on the other side of the commitment papers? She looked older, smaller somehow, without her carefully applied makeup and designer clothes, but her eyes still held that calculating gleam that had taken me so long to recognize. "You think you've won," she said quietly, "but you've destroyed your own life to hurt me. David's gone. Your friends don't trust you, and everyone thinks you're the daughter who had her own mother committed out of spite." "David came back," I said calmly. "It took some time and a lot of therapy, but we're working through it. The wedding is back on. Smaller this time, more intimate. Just people who actually care about us." Her composure cracked slightly. "He'll never truly trust you again, not after seeing what you're capable of." "You're right about that," I admitted. "But the thing is, what I'm capable of is protecting myself and the people I love from predators. David finds that quality reassuring, not frightening." I leaned forward, matching her posture. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out, Mom? You taught me everything I know about reading people, about recognizing manipulation attempts. Did you honestly believe I'd let you destroy my life and not fight back?" "I raised you," she said, her voice breaking with manufactured emotion. "I sacrificed everything for you. My youth, my chances at love, my whole life. All I wanted was to be part of your happiness." "No, what you wanted was to take my place in it. There's a difference." I stood up, signaling the end of our visit. "The doctors say you might be here for 6 months, maybe longer. They want to make sure you're not a danger to yourself or others before they release you. And when they do release me, you'll have a restraining order waiting for you. 500 yards from me, from David, from anyone in my life. If you violate it, you'll be back here permanently." As I walked toward the door, she called out one last time, "You'll regret this, Becca. When you're old and alone and you realize that I was the only person who ever really loved you, you'll regret this." I turned back to look at her, really look at her, seeing not the woman who had raised me, but the predator who tried to consume my life. "No, Mom," I said softly. "The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to understand that love isn't supposed to hurt." Epilogue 6 months later. I'm writing this from the back porch of the house David and I bought together, a little craftsman bungalow with a garden where I'm learning to grow things instead of just analyzing them. The wedding was beautiful, small and simple, with only the people who truly mattered to us in attendance. Aunt Linda walked me down the aisle, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. My practice is thriving in ways I never expected. Word got out about my experience. Not all the details, but enough for other therapists to refer clients who've experienced similar family manipulation. I've become something of an expert in psychological abuse within family systems, and there's a dark satisfaction in using what Mom taught me to help other people recognize and escape similar situations. David and I are in couples therapy, working to the trust issues that come with having your reality systematically undermined by someone you loved. Some days are harder than others. Sometimes he looks at me with a flicker of uncertainty, wondering if the woman he fell in love with was capable of such calculated revenge. Sometimes I wonder the same thing. But then I remember that I didn't start this war. I just finished it. And I used the only weapons that could defeat someone who knew me as intimately as Mom did: patience, planning, and a better understanding of human psychology than she'd ever given me credit for. Mom was released from Willowbrook last month. The restraining order holds, and I haven't heard from her directly, but Aunt Linda tells me she's moved to Arizona, started over with a new life, and a new story about the ungrateful daughter who betrayed her. I hope she finds peace there. I hope she gets the help she needs. But mostly,
I hope she stays far away from me and anyone I care about. The truth is, I am changed by what I did. There's a coldness in me now, a calculated awareness of human weakness that wasn't there before. I see manipulation tactics everywhere, in my clients, in strangers, in the subtle power games people play without even realizing it. Sometimes I catch myself analyzing David's words for hidden meanings or testing his loyalty in small ways, and I have to remind myself that not everyone is my mother. But I also know something now that I didn't know before. I am capable of protecting myself. I can recognize predators even when they wear the faces of people who claim to love me. I can fight back with intelligence and precision when someone tries to take what's mine. And I can do it without losing my essential humanity. My mother taught me that love should consume and possess, that sacrifice should come with debt, that family ties are chains that bind rather than bonds that support. She was wrong about all of it. Real love, the kind I have with David now, the kind I'm building with friends who actually see me clearly, doesn't try to own or control or manipulate. It just is. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about having my own mother committed. The answer is complicated. I feel sad that it came to that. I feel angry that she forced my hand. But guilty? No. Because the alternative was letting her succeed in destroying my life to satisfy her own twisted needs. She gambled that I wouldn't fight back, that my love for her would blind me to her betrayal long enough for her to complete my destruction. She was wrong. And in the end, the very skills she'd taught me, the ability to read people, to plan strategically, to understand the deepest motivations of human behavior, became the tools of her downfall. I learned something important about justice during those months of careful planning and precise execution. Sometimes the most poetic revenge isn't dramatic or violent or immediate. Sometimes it's simply ensuring that the truth comes to light and consequences follow naturally from someone's own actions. I didn't destroy my mother's life. I just stopped letting her destroy mine. The garden is coming along nicely. Tomatoes and herbs, nothing fancy, but they're growing strong and healthy in the Oregon sun. David says it's therapeutic watching me nurture things instead of just analyzing their dysfunction. Maybe he's right. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Learning to create instead of just surviving, to build instead of just defending. But I keep my psychological tools sharp just in case. Because I know now that predators can wear any face, speak any words of love, or claim any relationship as their justification for abuse. And I've learned that sometimes the only way to stop them is to become something they never expected. They're equal in strategy, they're superior in understanding, and they're master in the art of consequences. My mother taught me that love should consume and possess, that sacrifice should come with debt, that family ties are chains that bind rather than bonds that support. She was wrong about all of it. Real love, the kind I have with David now, the kind I'm building with friends who actually see me clearly, doesn't try to own or control or manipulate. It just is. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about having my mother committed. The answer is complicated. I feel sad that it came to that. I feel angry that she forced my hand. But guilty, no. Because the alternative was letting her succeed in destroying my life to satisfy her own twisted needs. She gambled that I wouldn't fight back, that my love for her would blind me to her betrayal long enough for her to complete my destruction. She was wrong. And in the end, the very skills she'd taught me, the ability to read people, to plan strategically, to understand the deepest motivations of human behavior, became the tools of her downfall. I learned something important about justice during those months of careful planning and precise execution. Sometimes the most poetic revenge isn't dramatic or violent or immediate. Sometimes it's simply ensuring that the truth comes to light and consequences follow naturally from someone's own actions.
I didn't destroy my mother's life. I just stopped letting her destroy mine. The garden is coming along nicely. Tomatoes and herbs, nothing fancy, but they're growing strong and healthy in the Oregon sun. David says it's therapeutic watching me nurture things instead of just analyzing their dysfunction. Maybe he's right. Maybe that's what healing looks like, learning to create instead of just surviving, to build instead of just defending.
But I keep my psychological tools sharp, just in case. Because I know now that predators can wear any face, speak any words of love, claim any relationship as their justification for abuse. And I've learned that sometimes the only way to stop them is to become something they never expected. They're equal in strategy, they're superior in understanding, and they're master in the art of consequences. My mother thought she taught me to be strong. She was right, just not in the way she intended. And now I use that strength not to hurt, but to protect, not to manipulate, but to illuminate, not to destroy, but to defend what matters most. Some battles are worth fighting, even when they cost you everything you thought you knew about love, especially then. The sun is setting over our little garden, and David will be home soon with takeout from that Thai place we love. It's a simple life, a quiet happiness built on truth instead of manipulation, trust instead of control. It's everything my mother tried to take from me and everything I fought to keep. In the end, the best revenge wasn't destroying her. It was building something beautiful in spite of her, something she could never touch, never poison, never take away. Something that was finally, completely mine. If you loved and enjoyed this story, do not forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it. Until our next update, take care.